Welcome back to Unlocking the Paranormal, the podcast dedicated to uncovering a deeper understanding of the unexplained, one creepy deep dive at a time. Tonight, we're kicking off the very first installment of the spooky summer series, where summer vacations take a terrifying turn. As the weather warms up and school lets out, families everywhere are packing their bags and setting off on road trips. Beach vacations, camping adventures, and cozy cabin getaways. But not every destination is as peaceful as it appears. Some places have a history, and some places have a presence. And some vacations leave travelers with memories they will never be able to explain. Throughout the summer, I'll be sharing chilling tales of haunted hotels, eerie Airbnbs, unsettling campgrounds, mysterious roadside encounters, and paranormal experiences that turned ordinary getaways into unforgettable nightmares. You guys, I sourced the internet for some of the spookiest encounters, and I'm honestly excited for you all to hear them. All of these stories might just make you think twice before booking your next stay. So let's get into it. For the first story, we are headed to Hotel Provincial in New Orleans. One man shared an experience he had while staying at the hotel, a location long associated with paranormal activity. According to local lore, part of the property once served as a Civil War hospital. The hotel itself is made up of several buildings, and the building at the rear of the property where surgeries were reportedly performed is said to be the most haunted. What makes his story particularly interesting is that he claims to have captured a photograph showing what appears to be a ribbon of light descending from the ceiling inside the former surgery building. Fortunately, he and his family were staying in a different building on the property. Now, unfortunately, the photo was not provided in this post, so I'm not able to share the photo that he is speaking of. Even so, the single night he spent there became one of the longest nights of his life. As darkness settled over the hotel, he began to feel increasingly uneasy. The room felt heavy, almost oppressive, and he couldn't shake the sensation that someone was watching him. Hours passed, but the feeling never faded. Then, sometime in the middle of the night, he suddenly awoke. The ceiling light was on. As he looked across the room, he saw a figure walking from one side to the other. At first, he assumed it was his father moving about the room. But the more he thought about it, the less that explanation made sense. His father had a disability that affected the way he walked, giving his movements a very distinctive stiffness. The figure crossing the room moved nothing like that. Its stride was smooth, fluid, and most certainly effortless. The next morning, he casually asked his father why he had turned on the light during the night, assuming he had gotten up to use the bathroom. His father's response immediately sent a chill down his spine. He said he had never gotten out of bed at all that night. Whether there was a perfectly rational explanation or something more mysterious at work, it's impossible to know. But according to the man who experienced it, it remains the creepiest night of his life. So that is it for the first story of today's spooky summer series. We are going to get into another one here shortly, but before I do, if anyone has ever experienced a shadow figure, you know just exactly how terrifying that actually is. It's very weird to see something that is just a shadow or a figure moving about when you know that no human is actually there. It is very off-putting, but honestly, truly just terrifying. Now I'm going to be sharing a story that was shared on our ghost stories over on Reddit from user TopU5721. And this was shared a while ago. But basically, I'm going to be retelling the story, but in third person to kind of break down the details, just to make the flow of the story a little bit easier. Now, this story comes from a man who describes himself as a skeptic, or at least he used to be. Despite having a fascination with the paranormal, he had never considered himself a true believer. He regularly watched ghost hunting videos, browsed paranormal forums, and even had visited some of America's most famously alleged haunted locations, including the Omni Parker House in Boston, the Molly Brown House in Denver, the Whaley House in San Diego, Alcatraz at night, and the Winchester Mystery House on multiple occasions. Honestly, that's a pretty sweet lineup of haunted locations. I am really jealous. Okay, getting back to the story. None of those visits had ever produced anything he would consider evidence. Part of him wanted to believe. Another part was terrified of actually experiencing something paranormal firsthand. Then came a birthday trip to Lake Tahoe. Months in advance, he had planned a surprise getaway for his girlfriend's 30th birthday. Since she had mentioned wanting to spend some time on the slopes, he organized a ski trip and invited several of her closest friends to join them. The group rented a large Airbnb cabin in a quiet residential area of Tahoe, California. There was nothing isolated or unusual about the location. Other cabins surrounded them on all sides, with neighbors nearby and plenty of activity throughout the neighborhood. The cabin itself was spacious enough to accommodate 10 people or 5 couples. It featured a basement level with 2 beds, a lively main floor completed with a fireplace, games, and foosball table, and 3 bedrooms upstairs. He and his girlfriend stayed in the master bedroom. Across the hall was another couple, while his girlfriend's cousin occupied third bedroom by herself. The first night was exactly what you'd expect from a birthday getaway. There was drinking, laughter, games, and celebration. The group decorated the living areas and scattered balloons throughout the cabin. For most of the evening, nothing seemed unusual. Then the balloons started popping. At first, nobody paid much attention. One person suggested the balloons were drifting towards the heater vents and bursting from the heat. It seemed plausible enough, although he couldn't help but notice that not all of the balloons that popped were anywhere near the vents. He made a mental note of it and moved on. Later that night, after everyone had gone to bed and the cabin had fallen silent, more balloons continued to pop downstairs. One, then another, then another. The sounds echoed through the house between roughly 2 and 3:30 in the morning. The next day, plenty of balloons still remained intact, and nobody gave the incidents much thought. The second night would be much different. After spending the day skiing and snowboarding, the group returned exhausted. Instead of staying up late, everyone headed to bed around 11:30 that night. Not long afterward, he decided to turn up the thermostat. The cabin had grown cold, so he stepped out of his room and headed downstairs. As he passed the bedroom across the hall, he noticed the door was slightly open. The lights were on, and the bathroom appeared to be occupied. As he descended the dark stairwell, he heard floorboards creak behind him. Naturally, he assumed his friend, the boyfriend staying across the hall, had followed him downstairs to get some water and grab a late-night snack. The creaking continued as he crossed the living room toward the thermostat. Then, it stopped. The sound seemed to end just a few feet behind him near the kitchen. But no lights came on. No footsteps followed. Just nothing. Suddenly aware of how quiet the house had become, he called out, "What's up, dude? Need something?" He turned around. Nobody was there. The kitchen was empty. The living room was empty. There was no one standing behind him. For the first time that weekend, he experienced something he had only ever heard other people describe: the unmistakable feeling that he was being watched. Shaken, but unwilling to jump to conclusions, he returned upstairs without mentioning the incident to anyone. About 30 minutes later, the cabin still felt cold. Everyone appeared to be asleep, so he decided to go back downstairs and raise the thermostat a few more degrees. This time, he switched on the upstairs hallway light before descending the stairs. There were no mysterious footsteps behind him, no creaky floorboards, just the sound of his own movements. He reached the thermostat and began adjusting the temperature. As he stood there thinking about the earlier incident, another sound interrupted his thoughts. Several feet away, near the fireplace, he heard the foosball table. More specifically, he heard the ball. It audibly rolled across the surface of the table, then struck one of the side walls. He froze. No one else was downstairs. He was far too far away to have touched it himself. The sound had been unmistakable. Without waiting around for an explanation, he hurried back upstairs and climbed into bed. Even then, he tried to rationalize everything. Nothing on its own felt definitive enough to prove anything paranormal. So he said nothing. The following morning, the group packed up and began the drive home. During the trip, one of the friends staying across the hall brought up the balloons from the first night. Seeing an opportunity, he shared the strange experiences he had kept to himself. That's when everyone's attitudes began to change. The woman from the room across the hall suddenly went pale. She explained that on the second night, she had been lying awake in bed when she noticed a dark figure standing at the foot of the bed. At first, she thought she was imagining it, but after blinking several times and realizing it wasn't disappearing, panic set in. She immediately shook her boyfriend awake, the same boyfriend he had assumed was following him down the stairs earlier that night. The moment her boyfriend woke up, the figure vanished. As he listened to her story, he felt a chill run through him. Then, his girlfriend's cousin spoke up. She admitted that during the trip, she had repeatedly heard what sounded like breathing noises inside her room. At the time, she dismissed it as the normal sounds of an old cabin settling during the night. Taken individually, each of these experiences might have a reasonable explanation: popping balloons, creaking floorboards, a rolling foosball, strange breathing in the dark. But together, the man couldn't shake the feeling that something else had been present in that cabin, something none of them could explain. Before that trip, he considered himself a skeptic with an interest in the paranormal. Afterwards, he wasn't so sure. And while he admits he still searches for rational explanations first, he also says that he hopes that that's the closest thing he'll ever come to experiencing the paranormal again, because once was more than enough for him. Oh, and that was the second story in today's mini episode of the Spooky Summer series. Now, maybe there are perfectly rational explanations for every strange sound or every weird feeling, but putting them all together, I do have to agree with this guy and say that it's too much of a coincidence. All of these things happening, and everyone in that cabin in each of the rooms had experienced something and something different. So to me, that is saying it's definitely paranormal and that cabin is definitely haunted. But it's up for you to decide what you believe. I would love to hear your thoughts on these stories. And honestly, if you've ever experienced anything strange while traveling, either a haunted hotel or an eerie Airbnb or an encounter you still can't explain, I would love to hear your stories. You can email them to me at unlockingtheparanormalpod@gmail.com, or you can call the hotline and leave a voicemail and share your story that way. Now, I don't have the phone number memorized. I probably should, but at this point, I don't. So the phone number will be in the description of this podcast episode if you prefer to leave a voicemail and share your story that way. And who knows, you might even hear it featured in a future episode of the Spooky Summertime series. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to follow and subscribe so you never miss a new deep dive into the paranormal and the next spooky summer episode. And don't forget to check out my social media. I am on TikTok, I'm on Instagram and Facebook, where you can find additional creepy content. I do occasionally share bonus paranormal confessions or get into other trending paranormal news. And if you've made it this far, I appreciate you listening and joining today. Honestly, your support is everything. It makes the podcast. So, if you could leave a review, that would be awesome. Don't forget to show your love by sharing the podcast with anybody that you think might enjoy it, or just everyone in general, to be quite honest. They don't even have to enjoy the paranormal, just share it. And I cannot wait for you all to hear the next episode of the Spooky Summer series. I'm telling you, these stories get weirder and creepier as we go. And honestly, we already started off with 2 shadow figures, so that's pretty darn terrifying. Again, thank you for joining me today. And until next time, stay curious.